You know, a lot of Canadians know a thing or two about RRSPs, but there's a lot more to these things than just putting your money away and then at some point in your retirement pulling all that money out. And Andrew Kirkland joins us. He's the president of Justwealth Financial, and he's an expert in all things RRSPs. Great to see you
Yeah,
again,
well,
Andrew.
great to be here, Pat. Yeah, we had a lot of fun last month talking about RESPs. So it'll be good to kind of get under the hood of RSPs this time too. So I'm looking forward to it.
I, I, I got a lot of feedback on those RESPs because a lot of people aren't aware of them, but people are certainly aware of
Yeah,
RRSPs for the most part,
yeah,
aren't
oh
they?
yeah. Like RSPs are definitely an account type that's being used by the majority of Canadians, right? They've been around for quite some time, and they're a great investment vehicle. They offer a lot of benefits, and they certainly help towards saving for retirement, and not just for saving for retirement. There's other avenues that it can assist with, whether it's purchasing a new home or maybe even going back to school. You can access some of your RSP proceeds to do those types of activities. But yeah, for the most part, people use an RRSP or a registered retirement savings plan to save for that retirement age when they get into their 60s and early 70s. It has to be moved, but yeah, it's a very popular investment vehicle, and a lot of Canadians use it.
We should go through what exactly an RRSP is. I mean, you've gone through the registered retirement savings plan, but I'm of an age that when you walked into the bank, they'd say, "Would you like to buy an RRSP?" And it was kind of analogous to buying a mutual fund. It's not that at all, is it? It's an actual
Yeah, you know
account.
what? It's something that a lot of Canadians they think is an investment, and the account type being an RSP is one and the same thing, but they're actually very different. The
Yeah.
RSP is really, like I said, an account type. It's something within that account type you make investments into. As an example, back in the day, a lot of people would buy mutual funds. Nowadays, most people are you buying exchange traded funds or individual stocks or bonds. But yeah, it's that RSP wrapper, and then within that, you can have individual investments of many different ones. It could be a savings account at a bank if you wish, right? But yeah, a lot of people say, "Oh, I have an RSP," and they think that's it. But what are you invested in within that RSP is really the main question, and a lot of people sometimes misunderstand how that actually works.
Yeah, there's that misconception. The other misconception, and I do it myself, is I'm never really sure until I get into the Canada Revenue Agency online portals. I'm never really sure how much I can put into a registered retirement savings plan. So maybe walk me through the rules, if you
Yeah,
will.
so and they can get complicated, and they're individualized to you and your situation, right? Everyone will have a different RSP contribution amount, but basically, in a nutshell, like I said, an RSP is an account type that you put money into, and then any money you put into that account or that RSP can be invested in multiple things: exchange traded funds, stocks, and all that stuff. But any money you put in, say for example, you put in $10,000, you can then have that
Mm.
$10,000 contribution reduce your taxable income in the year you made that contribution. So, for all intents and purposes, if you had a salary of $100,000 from your employer and you wanted to reduce that salary because you wanted to pay less taxes, you could make an RSP contribution of $10,000, and you would be able to, when you do your taxes, report to the government that my income was $90,000, so only tax me the amount that someone who's making 90,000 should be taxed, right? So now,
Right.
as far as how much you can put in, it's really dependent on a couple factors. It could be it's a percentage of your previous year's income, right? So if your previous year's income was going back to $100,000, that means that you could contribute $18,000 you would get $18,000 more of RSP contribution limit added to your kind of plan or your bucket, if you will. But if you don't make a contribution of that into that RSP for that year, you can roll that $18,000 into future years, and it keeps adding up every single year that you don't make a contribution. But every time you make a contribution, it will reduce that income. So there's certain maximums that the government will allow. So it's like 18% of your income up to a certain maximum that you can put in, or would be added to your contribution limit. In 2021, it's around $27,000. So whatever's the lower, the lesser of the amount between 18% of your income or $27,000 would be the amount that would be added to your RSP contribution. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's very personalized to you based on your income, and you know how much room you've had carry forward from previous years. So a few places that you can get this and find out how much actual RSP contribution limit you have. One being your notice of assessment. So when you do your taxes or someone does your taxes for you, you're going to get a notice of assessment. It'll say it on there. The other place that I find that more people are becoming aware, but not everyone's aware of this, but CRA has a phenomenal portal, if you will, where you can go in and actually see what is your RSP contribution limit. You know, it'll show your notice of assessment. It'll show your TFSA contribution limit. It'll show any documents the CRA has been sending to you. It's called CRA My Account. It's an online portal that you can go in. You know, you have to kind of set up the portal, and you know they ask you some security questions, but it's a phenomenal resource to get access quickly and easily to some of those, you know, as an example, RSP contribution limit and how much money you can put into an RSP in that particular year.
Yeah, the thing that really hasn't changed through all these years, though, and you're right about these contribution limits have changed through the years. The deadline, I think, is still the same, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still kind of March 1st, depending on if it's a leap year or not. It's usually 60 days after the end of the year, right? So in most cases, it's, you know, March 1st. And why that's important, and it sometimes can be confusing, but really why March 1st is a kind of a date which is important when it comes to RSP. So we're coming into 2022, right? And before March 1st, 2022. So if you made a contribution today on January 27th, 2022 into your RSP, you can actually use that contribution of X number of dollars, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to reduce your 2021 tax years, your tax year income. So, you know, that first 60-day contribution up until March 1st can be used to reduce your 2021 taxes, which is a good little vehicle because you actually know what your 2021 income is going to be because, you know, 2021 is behind us. So yeah, that's kind of how that why that's important in the first 60 days. And any institution that you're working with, whether it's the bank or, you know, Justwealth, we provide the RSP contribution receipt in your client portal, and in fact, it's actually directly linked to the CRA My Account website. So, anyways, that's kind of how that works. Hey, Pat, we got another question coming in.
Yeah.
It's saying, what type of investment should I have in my RSP? So this is a good question. And again, we kind of made reference to this earlier about you can have multiple avenues of investments or vehicles, if you will. The structure in the frame is the RSP, and then within that frame, you can have exchange traded funds, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. At Justwealth, you know, most people with us do have RSPs, and they invest within their RSPs, and we use strictly exchange traded funds, and it's all about matching the risk level of your objective for your RSP with an appropriate risk level portfolio. And I kind of made, you know, in most cases, people invest for retirement. So if you're in your 30s or 40s, that could be, you know, 20 or 30 years from now. So you have the ability to take on more risk, and you may be able to take on more equity exposure in your portfolio and more equity exchange traded funds. But maybe if you're getting closer to that date when you're going to have to start withdrawing money from your RSP, it's more focused on a conservative portfolio and being a more fixed income oriented portfolio.
Oh, okay. So you've kind of answered my next question, but maybe crystallize it a little bit more for me, because do you or should you change your RSP investments as you get older?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one we get often, and there's no one right answer for that. It's very personalized to that particular person. But I would say, for the most part, people tend to reduce or lower the risk within their portfolio as they get closer to the point to when they're going to be withdrawing their RSP. I think that's just a sound philosophy and strategy to follow within your RSP as you get closer, reduce the risk. Because the last thing that you really want to have is you come to a point where you're going to have to start taking money or start being in a position where your RSP becomes a RIF, and maybe we can talk about that later, but that's when you start taking money out, and you don't want to necessarily be in a position where you're taking money out of your registered plan and the market has dropped for whatever reason. It could be like the global pandemic, it could be war, it could be any catalyst that may drop the markets, but you should probably be focusing on insulating yourselves from big market movements and big volatility when you're withdrawing money from those investments.
Yeah, so towards the end, focus on capital preservation. You bring up an interesting point, though, and it has to do with the taxes, because you said, initially you had $100,000 and you reduced your taxes by whatever you contribute to the RRSP. But it's not really tax free, because when you do take it out, you're going to pay taxes on that, 100% right?
So it's great because it can reduce your income in the year you make the contribution. And presumably, you would make that contribution when your income earning years are higher, right? So you're maybe in your peak earning years, and your tax bracket's higher, exactly. And then when you go to take it out, hopefully you're retired and you don't have the employment income anymore, so your income level isn't that high, and your taxes aren't as high, and your taxes only aren't that high, and then you're taking the money out in a lower tax bracket. And that's kind of I guess if it was a game, what you want to do. You want to put the money in when your tax bracket is the highest, and you want to take the money out when your tax bracket is the lowest, right? So, okay, we got another question here from Dan. He says, growth versus income portfolios, how to decide which to choose? So that's a good question.
Good question, Dan.
Good question. Now, this, again, there's, very personalized to your objective and whatnot, but typically what we see, and when we're talking with investors about portfolios and what to invest in within their RSP, typically a growth portfolio would be used while an investment in an RSP, okay? Because the primary objective would be to accumulate wealth and grow and have that objective as the primary one. Now,
and the RSP contribution grows tax-free while it's growing.
Exactly. Yeah, everything, there's no taxes as far as it's kind of a tax sheltered, but when you kind of take the money out, that would be considered income. But I'll get into that in a second. But as far as when you start taking the money out, you're going to be taking it out when it's a RIF for the most part. In most scenarios, you're going to be taking the money out by transferring it from an RSP to a RRIF, and that's not a registered retirement income.
Registered retirement
income fund. You got to get those acronyms and work those out. But in that case, what is forced upon you is you have to withdraw a minimal amount from that RRIF every year, right? There's a percentage based on your age that you have to withdraw. So in that case, what happens quite frequently, and we talk to a lot of investors about this, is but transitioning the portfolio to an income portfolio. And we have income portfolios and from low risk to high risk. But again, it's trying to match what your withdrawal percentages and trying to supplement that with income. So we don't necessarily have to touch the capital. We can have the income from the investments fund those withdrawals. That's not always the case. Like there could be a scenario where, I just want to keep my objective to grow as much as I can. And in some cases, people, when it becomes a RIF and they have to take the minimum out, they actually don't, they take it out of the RIF, but they just reinvest it into a TFSA, right? So, because they don't need the cash flow from that RIF. So in that case, if you look at that money, the objective could still be growth, and maybe it's not providing an income or a source of cash flow, right? So, yeah, there's no exact answer, but it's very situational. But that kind of hopefully gives you some, yardsticks to work with.
Yeah, there is a tax component to it, because if you want income in dividends, dividends are treated differently outside a registered plan than they are inside a registered plan.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So
so if you want dividend income, don't put it in your RSP.
Yeah, you could definitely make that argument that if you have the ability to invest and you've maybe maximized your RRSP, you could open up a non-registered and invest in a dividend-paying ETF or a dividend-paying stock. But if the goal is to reduce your income in your peak earning years by reducing your taxes and making contributions into your RSP, you can do that and then take the money out when your income level is lower, and that's kind of how you kind of make it work. Here's a question. Go ahead. I was just going to say, it comes to balance.
Oh, here's a question I always get from my wife is a government worker, and she always asks me, if I have a pension, do I really have to have an RSP?
Well,
because she's going to get a pension as a government worker. Bless her, it's a great thing. But do you need an RSP?
She's in a great situation, because these days pensions are very hard to come by. It's usually government workers,
yeah, exactly,
or service members or teachers or anything like that. So to answer that question, it really depends on the pension is going to provide a great core to her retirement income, right? But it ultimately depends on what is her retirement income need, right? If that pension is going to provide enough income for her, then yeah, the fact of having an RSP and having it turned into a RRIF so that you have to, then you're forced to take out a minimum withdrawal, which is going to be considered income, which may trigger some clawbacks on some other income tested government benefits like old age security or guaranteed income supplement. Investing in an RSP may not be a situation that is ideal for her. And she's in a situation where she's in amongst the few, but it may not make sense for her. But maybe utilizing a tax-free savings account may be a better avenue for her, because she's not necessarily forced to take money out of a tax-free savings account, and any money she does take out of a tax-free savings account is that tax-free, right? So, going back to it, all depends on what is her income need in retirement, and I would have to assume that her lifestyle would be so that it's not like her income need is going to go up more when she retires, right? Your pension is based on your working retirement income, and then it's usually a percentage of that. So as long as her income need doesn't surpass her pre-retired working income need, she should be fine.
I would bet on that. You don't know her.
Yeah. So we got another question here. Is it worth taking out an RSP loan to utilize the contribution limit? So this is a good question, and there's a lot of factors that play it here. You could take out an RSP loan, max out a contribution there, or put in whatever amount you get on the loan, and reduces your income in that year, or reduces your tax that you have to pay in that year, and then you can get a tax refund, and then use that to potentially pay off a portion of the loan. There are strategies like that. It's hard to say exactly whether it's is it worth it or not. I'd have to know a little bit more about your specific situation to know if it's something that would be worth taking out. But it is a strategy that can be done and has been done, and can work in some scenarios.
One RSP subject that you didn't touch on earlier when you were talking about the structure of the RSP, there are also spousal RSPs, where you make a contribution on your wife's or your spouse's behalf, in my case, it's wife, to help her with her retirement.
Yeah. So that
She'll be helping. She'll be helping me. So I'm I'm jumping the gun here.
Pension, yeah. So so a spousal RSP was kind of a tax planning exercise where, you know, a higher earning spouse could make a contribution and reduce their income and their taxes in the year they make the contribution. But then when the money comes out, it's taken out in the spouse's name, and their income may be lower. So that was a strategy that was employed and was very popular in a lot of times, in a lot of cases. And it seems to be a strategy in an account type like a spousal RSP seems to be not as utilized now, because there's been some changes in the tax rules whereby you can actually split income. So when you take the money out,
Right.
if you take $10,000 out, 5,000 can go to spouse A, 5,000 go to spouse B. So it's kind of collectively reducing the taxes and the incomes and spreading it across the two tax holder or two taxpayers. But yeah, that's kind of how that worked. But when the income splitting rules came into play, it kind of lost its luster a little bit.
It's cachet, as they say.
You got it.
When should people consider getting out of their RSP? As you said, suggest moving it into a RRIF, or there are other strategies. When should they start talking about it?
Well, they have to do it by the year they turn 71. That's the latest that it has to happen, because in that year, any RSPs have to be put into a RRIF that year, and then you have to take out the minimum the following year, right? And it's a certain percentage. When you should start thinking about it is probably aligned to, you can do it whenever. You can do it at any age. You can start moving RSP assets over to a RRIF at any age. But typically what happens is people start thinking about it when, you know, they're in that time frame where they're going to be retiring soon. I would say kind of like the 5 to 10 year window, and not necessarily thinking about when to withdraw, but maybe even thinking about what are the investments within your RSP, and getting that prepared for a decumulation phase, right? So there's two factors: is thinking about when you're going to start withdrawing the money, and then based on that, what are the investments that this RSP should be invested in, and maybe it's time to get a little bit more conservative as you get closer to that particular date. But it's usually around retirement.
Yeah. And I guess if you took a sabbatical or you took a year off, you could take money out of your RSP. You'd have to pay taxes on it if you did that. But you could take money out of your RSP anytime before that.
You're right. Yeah, and it's there's certainly I guess an argument for that, to, you know, say for example you've been, you know, making a good income, and then you take that year off and don't have any income. Again, you put the money in when you're at a higher income, so you can take the money out at a lower income, and that's kind of what you want to do, right? What I would say in that scenario, when you take the money out, if you don't need it, because you're not retired and it was literally you're just taking a year off to go traveling, reinvest it back into a tax-free savings account. So you still have the tax shelterness of the investment, and you've got the reduction in taxes when you made the contribution in, and you were able to take it out at a much lower tax bracket, but yet still keeping it in that tax sheltered wrapper by using a TFSA.
Oh, cool strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people will use a tax-free savings account as a complement and almost in tandem with an RSP. You could be in a situation where your income that you make is very variable from one tier to another, but you know maybe this year your income level was high, so your taxes are high, so you want to make a contribution to reduce the amount of taxes that you're overall paying. Whereas next year, you know, maybe not such a good year in income level, but you still have money to invest. So don't use that RSP contribution room to reduce your taxes a little bit because your income level is low, but instead put it in a TFSA and then have it grow very much like an RSP would grow, kind of tax sheltered. And in that case, a TFSA, you can take out tax-free when you actually withdraw the money.
I kind of know the answer to this one in advance, but I'll ask it anyway because I want you to walk me through the process. Because how much money do I need to have in an RSP? And the answer is however much you need.
Yeah.
I get it, but at the time that you require the money at retirement,
Right.
presumably. But walk me through the process. What do you have to think about?
There's no number that will tell you exactly you need $500,000 in an RSP. Again, it all depends on, going back to talking about your wife, Pat, it all depends on what is the income need that you think you believe you need in retirement. And some kind of, there's very sophisticated financial planning that could go into this. And we work with clients on financial planning and work through different scenarios and all this. But to simplify it to something reasonable and everyone can probably wrap their head around it, is just think about, okay, when you're retired, what do you believe is the income that you're going to need in a particular year? And that could be, some people say, well, that's 60% of my working income, that's 50% of my working income. There's a lot of different beliefs out there, but you could probably estimate, and as you get closer to that retirement date, you'll have a better understanding. But I know you're thinking about this, you may be asking yourself this question when it's 20 years till I retire, right? But I would say, try to guesstimate what is that income that you're going to need in retirement. And it could be $50,000 in today's dollar, and start subtracting what other sources will be coming in. So you have this income bucket. You got the retirement income bucket, and say it's $50,000. You're going to have some CPP, Canadian pension plan, is going to fill that bucket. We have some old age security that's going to fill that bucket. And then it's a matter of what other sources do you have? And a lot of the cases, it could be a pension, right, which is great. So you feel a little bit more with that pension. And then it's like, okay, I need $10,000 a year to fill that bucket. Okay. And maybe you say, well, this $10,000, I'm going to need it for 30 years. So then you do $10,000 times 30, and you got to have an RSP of 300,000 or somewhere around there, right? So very simple back of the napkin type of calculations, but that could gauge you to where, if you're on track or not. But if there's anyone out there who wants more information about that, we do some in-depth kind of financial planning, but simplified it for people so that they can be prepared, or at least understand if they're on track for retirement. And there's different scenarios you can run and all this stuff, and it's very helpful for people. So.
I love our audience, Andrew. I don't know whether you can see this, but a guy named Moneyman98, and I have no idea who this person is, says Pat has at least 20 years until he retires. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'll be an old coot by then. Hey, listen, so we're getting close to half an hour now, Andrew. Walk me through where people can get more information.
Yeah, sure. So, well, we're always willing to help at Justwealth. We've got a lot of resources on our website that break down, kind of RSPs versus TFSAs. And if you want any information about all our portfolios, I know someone asked the question about growth and income. We have a performance page that breaks down the components of all of our portfolios, from growth, income, US dollar, education, target date, not specifically for RSPs, but all the information's on there. I would also say a phenomenal resource is getting set up on your CRA My account, so you can at least understand what is your RSP contribution, what is your tax-free savings contribution. And then as an extension for that, the government of Canada has a lot of great resources on, what are the rules when it comes to RSP? What are the important dates? How do you access the money when it becomes your RRIF? What are my options as far as accessing it if I'm going to be doing a home buyer's plan withdrawal to fund a first-time home buyer purchase? What if I'm going back to school and I want to use some of my RSP proceeds to help fund the annual education costs, which is called a lifelong learning plan? A lot of great information on there. So I would point people to any one of those sources, the justwealth.com website, the CRA My Account portal, but also just in general, the government of Canada, and just Google search RSP Government of Canada, and you'll get some great information.
As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, or a little bit more than 2 years ago, when you and I first met, you were the one who recommended the CRA My Account. And I kind of wasn't that tech up on the CRA. And I tell you, that's a gold mine, that thing is, to find out what you can do.
Not only like it's what you can do as far as making contributions, but all the institutions, and I know we report like if there's any tax documents, whether it's RSP contributions, if you have any taxable accounts like T3s, T5s, they're all there. Your accountant, will be able to find them there as well if you work with an accountant. So yeah, it's a great website. Doesn't take very long to set up, and provides a lot of really good information. So.
All right, Andrew, I think we're at time.
Yeah, I think we are. I think there may be a couple questions coming in, so we'll try to direct message a few of these questions. But yeah, Pat, as always, it's been a pleasure, and I'm glad everyone can join. And thank you for spending your evening with us. Appreciate it.
It flew by for sure. Great to see you, Andrew Kirkland, President, Justwealth Financial.
Bye for now.